Welcome everyone to this first session we're hosting as xFigura. We want to really start carving out a space for academics to start bridging this new and emerging landscape of AI and architecture. This is something that is a very personal journey also to me. I'm part academic, full-time obviously on this startup journey. I'm an architect by training, but I'm super excited to have this first symposium, calling it Design Intelligence, New Pedagogies, and for AI-aided design, architectural design. So you guys, the guests, our guests today are the, let's say, some of our power users using the platform, but also leaders as well in pushing discourse within AI and architecture and really questioning so many different aspects, creative workflows, how we can really start rethinking the design process, merging machine learning. In this case, it's maybe more so on the generative AI side, but going from creative to analytical and everything in between. So I'm going to kick it off with a short introduction about xFigura and who we are. And then we'll, Tatiana will also be moderating this session, and I will give a little intro and we'll pass it on to 10-minute sessions, quick sessions from each of these speakers. So at a high level, for those new to xFigura, our mission is to empower architects, designers, and creative teams with AI native tools that enhance, not replace human creativity. We're here really to give a space, a new academic space to really talk about state of the art and how the profession is changing. We have deep industry partners on the enterprise level, but a large community also in this academic space. It's been really thrilling last semester to see the first full cohort of students and academics and engage with this tool as it's been developing over time. And this semester, we're launching a new cohort, new interest, new universities, and students globally using this tool. So you can see us as a way to package your own workflows, fully customizable, fully collaborative, into a single intelligence layer. We now host more than 60 models across text, image, video, 3D, and we are one of the first partners with World Labs. So we launched the first world model node recently inside xFigura. It's super exciting. For those new to it, it's image to 3D splat, so you can navigate it. And just to quickly pass the word to Tatiana, a small intro, I guess, to myself, my academic hat on, is last semester I taught at UPenn, an AI and architecture class. This semester I'll be at Harvard as a lecturer in the Master Design Engineering course. So I really think there's a lot of space and exciting things to be discussed here. Tatiana.
Hi, yes, and I'm Tatiana Crossley. I am a professor, assistant professor at Wentworth Institute of Technology, and in design studios, we've been really using different kinds of emerging technologies and experimenting with new ways and methodologies of thinking about design. The rightmost image was a quick design charrette that I just completed with students actually this week. They had a week basically to use AI tools and experiment with patterns and fabricate things with the CNC machine or different sort of computational methods. So this was just a really rapid experiment using xFigura and other tools to see how we can integrate AI and other kinds of tooling.
Awesome. And a small glimpse, the word is obviously to our guests here, but to frame how I also have approached this, this was the last class I taught, and very much interested on a personal level of this triad between rethinking architecture, merging this with interface prototyping from physical to digital, and this idea of entrepreneurship. How is this, how is the future of what does the future of practice look like? How can we teach topics like vibe coding, decoding, using ChatGPT to make interfaces use physical computing to merge physical and digital. So it's really interesting to start with xFigura and then really push on this and dive into, how far we can get in teaching students how to build not only workflows, but also tools to then build new workflows. So I will leave it as that. I want to then, I want to briefly give a short list order. We're going to introduce each person before each one talks. We're going to start with Christophe, Carla, Nesreen after, Sharu, and then Shermeen, and then Marco and William at the end. So thrilled to have you all. I will now pass the word in just a second to Christophe. Thanks so much for joining us. Thrilled to have you here with us. I know you're in Hong Kong, so a little late on your side, but a super quick intro for Christophe. Christophe is the associate head at the University of Hong Kong's Department of Architecture. His research explores computation design-driven methods for non-standard architecture, focusing on expanding architectural agency, enhancing site responsiveness, and shaping really contemporary practice. He holds a PhD from the RMIT University, and it's been really great to see you and your students across the whole semester really start diving deep into new design workflows. So I'll pass it on to you, Christophe. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, George. Let me share screen. I hope that works. 1 second. Should be this one. Is this coming in? Oh, am I still here? You still hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yes,
Okay, great. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me, George. Really excited to be part of this conversation. I made a small talk for you titled "Changing Rhythms of Change: Reminiscence on AI Integration into Architectural Education and Design." And I was wondering what I could best contribute to this conversation. I'm not going to show too many flashy images of what the students have produced, but I will show you how I framed the integration of AI in my fall studio teaching, and then very quickly what came out of it. And then I summarized some of the student reflections, which could be very interesting input maybe for you in the future as well. But first, to frame how I'm approaching the studio, I need to go back a little bit to my background, because it kind of positions me in maybe a particular way. So I'm a product of the DRL from the AA in London over 20 years ago. And I was there at a time where probably for the first time visualization was at a level where you could produce photorealistic imagery relatively straightforwardly, but it was still, of course, taking like an image like this would still take like 4 days of work to get there. But it was the first time that conceptual imagery could be brought to the photorealistic level to communicate certain things. And that really drove a lot of the projects that we're working on at the time. Now, since then, I worked for a few years in London at Zahaus, where this is the project that I completed, the Antwerp Ports House. So I was a lead architect for this. And in this project, again, visualization was a very important aspect of it, because we wanted to capture an affect of the building, how light responded to it. But why I bring it back in here today is that this project was only possible on budget because of computational design tools at the time, very clever strategic engineering, and then evolutionary algorithms avant la lettre to optimize the complexity of the facades and reduce the cost of eventual construction of it. Since 2010, I've been in Hong Kong, where I have my own practice. And there, again, we're looking at how computational design tools allow us to respond to the construction realities of the environment in which we're operating. So this is a project that recently completed here in China, where you can clearly see a parametric design approach fully optimized to the manufacturing capabilities of the locale to allow for a certain type of affect to come out. But I want to talk today more about the academic work that we're doing. And at the University of Hong Kong, I have three responsibilities: admin, but also research and teaching. And in the research, we started to look through my lab, the Building Complexity Lab, how computation and digital design tools can broaden the design solution spaces in resource-constrained environments, working with particular craftsmanship. So the projects that people may have seen from us in the past include at ZCB Bamboo Pavilion, where again, we're working with materiality and very clear logical solutions to design and production workflows to allow manual craftsmanship to come in to produce certain unusual or novel outcomes that clearly have a digital backbone and a local craftsmanship embedded in them. Just now, we recently released a video on one of our latest projects here, where again, we're working with natural, environmentally sustainable materials, local craftsmanship, and in this case, in the production of a school building in Bali for Bamboo. And here, the advancements in computer vision and extended reality lay at the foundation of the whole work, suddenly allowing for an alternative construction method to become possible at a very low cost with no plans, no drawings, in a very exciting way, really expanding the available design solution spaces locally. And it's important to have that framework, because in my design teaching, I always try to show students or bring students to the point where they challenge what computational design tools can do and how they can expand the available design solution spaces, especially in resource-constrained environments. And so in 2024, I taught the first cycle, the first year of a 3-year cycle of studios in the Master of Architecture here. The title was Future Craft, and the idea was there that we would really explore how the future of craftsmanship could potentially be. And in this studio, in the beginning, students did all the case studies, looking at precedents of projects that were built with either bamboo or earth. And then the brief was to then try to think outside of the box. And to my surprise, all the students that had very diligently done the first part of the studio looked at the precedents, done the modeling exercises, that basically embodied as much knowledge as they could from these craftsmanship. They found it incredibly difficult to then afterwards open up again and think outside of the box, except for 2 students who at the time, unprompted, brought Midjourney in to see if it could help them expand their thinking. And it produced these nonsensical from a material perspective, but fascinating outcomes from a design perspective. And they ended up in a much more interesting journey than most of the other students could have done. So that got me to rethink this past fall, in the second cycle of the second year of the cycle, where my goal originally was to consolidate on the tools and the techniques that people had developed. Instead of that, I decided to pull back and focus entirely on the ideation phases of the design process. And I really wanted to see how latest generative AI tools could help in opening people's imaginations and how to move forward. So in the past, of course, we also had access to the textual, numerical, and applied AI components, but I really wanted to focus on the visual this time because of the great strides that we've all seen in recent years. The challenge that I presented to the students is that it's really about identifying where the equilibrium lies between what we hand over to the AI and what we keep under our control, trying to identify what that interface is between agency and surrender of certain components, criticality coming in. The great difficulty being that most of these tools are built to oblige. They'll always give you an outcome. It's up to you to then guide that inquiry or adjudicate the whole process. So design research questions I presented to the students was, how can we enhance rather than replace human expertise, and how do we retain human oversight and validation? And so with that plan, George, you came out with xFigura at just the right time. So I think in September, when we gave students access to the tools, in the beginning of the semester, there were only 25 models. By the end of the semester, you were at 50. And I really enjoyed bringing this in because it gave immediately this full rounded access to all of the tools. So this was given to them as a brief, but we added to that access to the HoloLab that I've set up at Hong Kong University, where the 3D model generation was immediately linked to XR, because my goal was to push and immerse the students as hard as I could into this environment to see what would come out of it. I gave them as a methodology, as an exercise, that every day they had to produce a sheet on which they had to place at least 9 images that they would generate. So over the course of a semester, that would produce 90 sheets, 6 sheets a week. But I was very nervous about this immersion, and especially about the cognitive immersion that students have in the process of designing, because the AI tools are so quick and easy at providing solutions that there's often a disconnect or disengagement from the user. So I try to come up with some ways to detach them from the AI tools at the same time. So on these sheets, they had to every day in handwriting explicate what their aim of the day was or what their prompt was that they were looking for, evaluate the outcomes, and then identify their next steps to push them through this heuristic cycle. The idea was that if they do this every day, slowly some criticality will emerge. But then on top of that, every sixth sheet had to be fully hand-drawn, no computers allowed, no printing allowed, just to force them to take control again of the wheel, or at least an attempt to get there. And of course, this could be AR-driven. They could use all kinds of digital technology as long as what was on the paper was eventually hand-drawn. Then, as I mentioned, the immersion was again still part of it, using VR and the 3D model generation capabilities as part of the evaluation process to very quickly give students access to the spatial qualities of what was being generated in 3D, but at the same time, again, forcing them to detach by working with analog study models. Because the materials that we're working with were earth and bamboo, two materials that are very difficult to work with because they always have their own physical behavior. And study models are actually a great way to kind of engage with that level of the design process. But again, they could use augmented reality or whatever technique they could come up with to facilitate or streamline that process. As long as the end result was not 3D printed, it had to be fully analog. And so this is some outcome from the first cycle, the first year that I did. This year, I told the students that whatever we have on the wall at the end cannot be computer generated. All had to be manual. So no more CAD, no 3D modeling, no rendering, full analog production at the very end, 9 hand drawings, all handmade, and 1 final model. Of course, augmented reality again could be used to help in that process. But then on top of that analog world, they could produce a digital slideshow in which they could put all the AI-generated imagery and videos that they wanted to tell a complete story, really trying to push them to engage with this dialogue between analog and digital production. And that produced a very fascinating studio. So these are some of the results that you see at the very end. So they just had to come up with a small community building in Kyoto. So these are some of the outcomes that the students came up with. And of course, we had the absolutely stunningly beautiful imagery, perfectly controlled with the tools that they have. And students, because it was a material studio, produced some or generated some time-lapse videography that allowed us to have a conversation about how these buildings could potentially be built, but where you can still clearly see there's some nonsensical elements in there. So very interesting. But what was very fascinating was to see that many of the students fully embraced the analog at a level that I hadn't seen before, in combination then with Studio Ghibli style presentations, etc. The diagrams were all generated separately as well with tools like Notebook LM. But then some students kind of rejected the photorealism and started producing imagery like this, almost like Bernard Tschumi style diagrams, to help them ground or direct the design process in a way that they felt more comfortable with. This was one student who was also a painter by training. And here you see him generating a very, very unique type of graphics that then translated to digitally generated 3D model or physical model imagery that he then tried to replicate later. So very, very interesting outcome. So to go to the student feedback that I've got, so the most positive comments that I have received in the anonymous critical feedback at the end is it felt like entering an AI paradise. I have no doubt about AI and no doubt about the future of all of it. So many of the comments were really positive. AI can function as a powerful assistant. The results are often precisely what we are accustomed to identifying as creative breakthroughs. So it's a big surrender there. The emergence of AI represents a paradigm shift in the zenith in tool evolution. Here, highlighting it as a learning tool to help with the whole process. It allows the brain to reclaim its primary function, pure and unencumbered thinking, because it frees up so much more time during the semester. Then also the acquisition of architectural knowledge has changed. This is also because we use Notebook LM a lot for the processing of dense texts. So the barrier of knowledge has dropped because it's much more easily accessible using AI as a universal translator. And then here, the experience has inspired me to continue exploring how architects can creatively work with AI. Now, in the negative comments there, speed and beauty started to feel dangerous. Images were seductive but lacked responsibility. I was afraid of something powerful and problematic. Without strict constraints, they hallucinate to generic perfection, beautiful, plausible, but ultimately meaningless forms that float in a vacuum. I argue that this obsession with hyper-realistic representation risks creating a conceptual hollowness, void of thought without the design process. I find, on the contrary, find it quite unsettling and distracting to work with these generative images. And then one student who really revolted towards the end of the studio, to flirt with the future is the most despicable of conformism. The most craven way of flattering the stronger party, for the future is always stronger. It will undoubtedly be our judge, but it has no power over us. So just to wrap up, 6 themes kind of emerged. One, the shift from production to critical curation, where designers are now seen to add value by assigning meaning and curating solutions. The grounding of perfect hallucinations in reality being very important, especially in a material studio where material resistance can be used as a vehicle to push back. AI as a universal translator of knowledge, how it bridges the semantic gap, allowing designers to reverse engineer precise terminology from vague visual memories or descriptions. Then the 4th one, transitioning from representation to generation, using AI as an engine of discovery. Combating conceptual hollowness. Some find the AI's immediate visual complexity unsettling, preferring the comfortable abstraction of hand sketches to maintain intellectual control. But really interesting that AI then again can there help as well. And then a celebration of the irreplaceable value of craft and human touch. Now, to bring it back to the very beginning to fully wrap up, I found some slides in preparation of this talk from a talk that I gave in a thesis course 14 years ago, Digital Matters. And that was at a time where students were struggling to identify why digital was relevant in the context of a thesis. And I highlighted that in the late 90s, early 2000s, coming from the motion picture industry, this obsession came in with fields, with fluid geometry, etc. But that never really kicked in fully until photorealistic representation became possible. And architects like Ali Rahim and Hina Jamal, for example, produced AD magazines like this one, like on Elegance, where that became de rigueur. But when I was at the DRL in 2005, we visited Shanghai. And at that time, there was a moment where with 40 students, we ended up looking around Shanghai to find the Reebok flagship store that Ali Rahim had designed, and which was in an architectural tour guide of Shanghai, listed with an address and everything as if it was built, only to, after 2 hours of looking, to find out that it was actually a render, and people had never realized it. Definitely the publisher of the architectural manual had no idea that it was just a render. And so that created a very sour aftertaste, really questioning what the meaning of it all is, especially if people like Gary are able to build that complexity, actually, or people like Calatrava. But there was a strong reaction to that in the early 2010s. Websites like Calatrava Te La Clava, Calatrava Bleeds You Dry, a website that was basically keeping track of all the cost overruns and all the issues that came with this specific type of architecture, or even in the UK, the government banning curved school buildings being part of that. So there's a very interesting challenge of what the imagery control brings, and then questioning how digital tools can still help through coordination, digital fabrication, and so forth. So I know I'm probably running over time, but I want to highlight this one little text from Dan Willis and Todd Woolward, Diminishing Difficulty, Mass Customization and Digital Production of Architecture, in which they're mentioning that the reduction of complexity is actually a real challenge, especially when working in built architecture. The diminished architectural difficulty becomes a challenge, but new tools and technologies can't guarantee better architecture. However, talented architects thoughtfully and critically employing these technologies could surprise all of us. Hence, I feel that right now we're just again at a cycle similar to that, where suddenly a new tool comes in, and the disconnection from the tools with materiality is, for me, the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity that I see at the same time. So all to be continued. Just to quickly plug a few things, all our work is on our website. Have a look. The papers are also published on the BSL website, but I want to highlight this. We created a tutorial website where over 230 by now online tutorials are freely available for anyone to use, based on the last 15 years of teaching on all of the parametric and design tools and digital design tools that have been coming around in the past few years. So they're all nicely organized and structured, and AI is part of that. So please have a look, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christoph. This is really incredible work and a super broad approach in the last few courses you've taught, and I'm super excited about next steps. This manual, the 90 sheets, is such an interesting approach to then have the manual like critically, assess those designs. How can we bring new criticality in it? I am obsessed with these new hybridities of forcing the analog and then really getting out, these new like AI aided like hybrids. It's super exciting. So really fascinating and unique approach that you bring forward.
Thank you.
I would love to introduce Carla. She's an assistant professor of AI and architecture at the University of Florida. She's director of the Share Lab, and her research investigates the intersection of artificial and human intelligence to enhance creativity in architectural and landscape design, and to analyze large-scale urban data. She holds a PhD from ETH Zurich, and she has prior research. I think some of her ongoing research in the Share Lab is also on responsive approaches to natural disasters. It's been really great to see your work. You've been really pushing the needle, Carla, in the States and beyond, and awesome to see how you have really crafted the AI certificate that you guys have launched within your program at UF. So I don't know if you're going to share any of that, but you're one of the few and early universities, at least in the States, to really push this AI agenda so hard or so positively within an institution. Thank you, Carla.
Well, thank you, George. A pleasure to be here. And yes, I'm going to jump immediately to the presentation so we can have some chat later. You have to, let me see. I want to share some. Okay, that's great. All right. I'll jump to, wait a second. How are we doing? Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, this is good.
All right, wonderful. So I crafted this presentation specifically for today. We were prompted to show some of the students' output using xFigura, and I was trying to also give you a bit of a theoretical framework on how I'm thinking of the use of artificial intelligence into design practices. And this lecture is titled Representational Instrument. And the idea of representational instrument comes to make reference to what Crystal was talking of, the idea of visualization. I think is such a powerful instrument because it allows to comprehend something complex that is happening into a much more visual output. But in order to talk about artificial intelligence, I always like to start with this analogy. I find analogies to be powerful tools that can help us grasp very complex concepts, in this case, artificial intelligence. So if you think about artificial intelligence as acting as a tool or as an instrument, and if you think of what is the difference between them, a tool is built to be optimal and to be precise, like, for example, a motor or a lever that has been built for that specific task. But if you think about an instrument like a piece of paper or a violin, it really articulates something masterfully if you have a masterful human playing with it. So I think this is something that can help us navigate the realm of AI applied in architectural practice, because we will be able to see, or at least recognize, when we can use tools, AI as a tool or AI as an instrument. So I think, just to give you a bit of context, I've written some articles about this analogy because I think it is the key. It could become a key navigation tool to help us recognize when do we need to have a model that is precise and optimal, and when do we need that same model architecture to be a explorative design tool. So with that background, I crafted a design studio within the AI seminar, the AI certificate that we offer at University of Florida, where I have created these 3 pillars. So we have the pillar of analysis, design, and communication. And if you look at the very top, there is this idea of technology, and technology being represented as a tool or as an instrument. And depending on the way that you see the tool being used for site analysis, or for example, the instrument being helpful to understand what is going on in social media. And then later, there is an involvement of scale from city to room. So the idea is to be playful in the way that not only you use this technology, but as well when it is important that there is this heavy feedback on the human-centered approach. So with that framework, I will start with the reason why we're here today. So the reason why we're here today is because we have the access of this wonderful platform called xFigura. It has many models. George at the very beginning showed the different models that are not only text and or image, but also right now we have the ability to have them on 3D. I'd like to come back to a history, or at least a way that I think about it is right now we are in the same moment when we were in the Renaissance, when Alberti presented the perspective drawing. So at the time, the perspective drawing became something that was considered to be a representational tool. But today, I think with this new rise of these generative models, we have a new, not representational tool, but we have a representational instrument that if we're able to play with this instrument, we can have different outputs depending on how masterful your question, your process, and how you're using the AI will help you develop. So with that, I divided this presentation into 2 representational instruments. The first one is how to use it as watercolors. And I think this is, as I said, I will give you some examples of how my students use it in studio and in some seminars that I teach. So here is the work of some students, and usually we try to have these at least 4 steps. So we work heavily on generating input. Input could be drawn, input could be model, input could be collage. And then we use xFigura to help us translate from that input into a much more an exploration of materials, of form, of background. And then through that background, we go into something that we call the post-processing. So I think it is interesting to think about this process into a design exercise where you could assign specific tasks and assignments for each of these. For example, input, the xFigura, which we call the instrument. When you have the output, how you will keep working with it to create. In this case, these are some renders of a pavilion in a preserve here in Jacksonville. With the same thing, so we have the input. The input could be a model that we model an idea of a material, and then through that workflow, we could keep on working on how do we want to talk about this project, that the project becomes something that is not solely the output of a AI model, but is really related to how you want to tell a story. So it's about a narrative. And we worked as well with a lot of physical modeling. And one thing that we found extremely helpful with xFigura is that can help us explore some materials and lining conditions that we could do through camera obscura physically, but then we can enhance it with different prompts. And you see the final post-processing rendering of the same space that can communicate more complex ideas that we had about the project. So how do we work with xFigura as an representational instrument, as a collage exercise? And I find this to be explorative and a exercise that I will invite everybody in this call to do. So we at UF, or I'm pretty sure in many architectural universities, we use the collage as a medium to help us articulate complex ideas, so as a visualization instrument. So in this case, what we wanted to do is to start with an input that was this collaging exercise. And through this collaging exercise, we wanted to create a 2D, 3D translation that can help us through prompting about what the spaces are, the function, the size, create a 3D output. And I'm going to show you two examples of, for example, starting with the same motivation, which was this sample of a Malevich drawing about the self-portrait in 2D, and then how this could turn into a 3D spatial assembly. And then with that, what we are working on is to work with this output, which will be a collaging exercise from the initial prompt that still is a collage to xFigura as a collaging instrument, to using this output to then start thinking about how do you layer up this complexity. So these are exercises to help students in the early stages of their career to find these digital tools, or these, I will say, digital tools or digital instruments to help them understand spatial relationships, scale, size, and so on. So with that, I wanted to do a very quick charade of examples that we do in class, but I wanted to feature the AI certificate. The AI certificate is following the let's say, the framework of the Bauhaus, thinking of the studio as the central point, where we have foundational courses going the first semester. The foundational course that we offer is called Fundamentals of Coding and Computation. Then we have two other courses that are about, for example, the first one is AI and Ethics. Here you see them on the screen. And then the third one is called Machine Learning for Architects, where we applied much more applied-driven exercises. And then we end up with the design studio focused on AI applications. So what you're seeing here on the right, there is a very quick overview of the certificate structure, the credits if you're interested, how can you take it. If you're on the left, you're seeing kind of the output of the class. It's very explorative when you're doing fundamental of coding. When you're doing machine learning, it's much more explicit. And then if you're interested in knowing a bit more, there is the QR code here at the bottom of the screen. But I know probably I'm already running out of time. I just wanted to give also some space to one of our initiatives. This is an initiative that started almost 5 years ago between University of Florida, ETH Zurich, and throughout the years we have invited other universities like Carnegie Mellon and LTU to be part of our, let's say, initiative, or I will call it a project, or I will call it a motivation to talk about artificial intelligence and storytelling in architectural practices. This year, we have finally finished. Well, we have already selected the time. It's going to be in September, and it's going to be at SCIARC. So it's a free and open symposium where we have 10 to 12 speakers coming to talk about AI. So if you're interested to know more, we have the website. On the website, you'll see more or all the videos that we've collected throughout these 4 years. And then you can also see the specific, we have some data sets and some tutorials that we have created as well throughout these years of collaboration. I just want to give some space and time to my team. We are a very collaborative, multidisciplinary, young and excited group of researchers that are spanning from architects, landscape architects, urban planners, computer scientists, computer graphics, who are trying to do thinking about how to use AI in this realm. So to end, I think AI should be thought about an instrument, and I think of it as an instrument for empowering creativity, and should also be used as a tool to, in this case, in our lab, we use it for the social good. So with that, I really want to thank you all for your time and patience, and I hope you have questions about the way that we are using xFigura and the way that we think about using AI.
Thank you so much, Carla. Also, this is such an incredible approach you have and that you're bringing to UF. It's certainly a model that I'm sure many other universities can start bringing in. Clearly, there's that distinction between a certificate and then starting to embed it directly in curriculum. So it's like navigating that in these earlier moments must be an interesting conversation. I really love how you approached xFigura also in a somewhat similar fashion as Christoph, but approaching it directly from this representational instrument to the collage. It's like it's such a this analog, this way of like abstracting ideas, leveraging AI workflows. It's super interesting. Even layering complexity from image, but also merging like different views of 3D models. You think of what we have today and what's going to come in the next, you can't even say next year. It's very much like in the next 6 months. And now we launched Meshi. Now World Labs is super good. So I'm curious to see what the next versions of this. Thanks so much, Carla. Awesome. I would love to now introduce Nesreen. She is an assistant professor of architecture at the University of Colorado Boulder. Her research explores the intersection of architecture, digital media, and sacred spaces, with a focus on artificial intelligence and virtual reality. She holds a PhD from Texas A&M University, and she's published extensively internationally. It's been great to have you, Nesreen, follow us in this early journey of ours and see you at the many AI conferences, and you're also super active in this space. So thanks so much, Nesreen. I'll leave the word to you.
Thank you so much, George and Tatiana, for the invitation. Sorry, it's very early here, so I just woke up and I'm trying to get my voice back. So let me share my screen. Okay, share this. Okay, can you tell me what you see? Because I'm not seeing you guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can you see the full slide?
Full slides.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, everyone. And it was really amazing to listen to the previous presentations. I feel like now I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit towards more of how to think about AI in more of in a critical way. So, but I just want to give you a little background. So as George has mentioned, so my background is in the intersection of architecture, spirituality, digital media, and recently in the seeking how can this intersection create the spiritual experience. And recently, in the last 5 years, I've been incorporating more of the artificial intelligence and virtual reality. And right now, I'm actually working on a book that's going to be published this summer, hopefully. And it's called Religion and AI, where we tackle with my co-editors the theoretical and empirical approaches from different disciplines and different perspectives, and how AI is impacting our spiritual practices. So I've been teaching more on like the sacred architecture, spirituality, transcendence side for a few years now, before AI, and then I mean before the diffusion models became accessible to the general public, I would say. And then as soon as we saw the big bang of AI tools in the summer of 2022 with Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, and DALL-E, I immediately incorporated it into my sacred architecture studio just to see how AI can comprehend these deep concepts about, for example, transcendence, and what does it mean to be transcendent, and what kind of attributes, participate into the transcendent space. However, the class that I'm going to talk about today is not a studio. It's an elective course, and in here I'm asking the question, even to myself, like why this course and why now? Is because I noticed that AI is entering the practice faster than architecture education can really critically address. And also, I have to give you a little background. I come from an environmental design program, and I am located in Boulder. So you might imagine like we're very into nature, and AI is something that is not welcome, if I may say. So there's a big there's a big rejection of AI tools. So that's why I wanted to propose a class that, instead of focusing on image generation or video generation, on understanding what these tools are doing and how to comprehend them and how to use them efficiently. So of course, this is what the first day of class. So it's an elective course. And out of 800 students, I had 8 students that registered for my course because I was competing with Revit and Rhino electives. And also the course is interdisciplinary. So I had students from architecture, from landscape architecture, and product design. And of course, the first question that I asked, first of all, why are you here? Why are you taking this class? And then we started talking about their expectations and their concerns. And what I noticed the most, first, like, they wanted to take this class because they didn't know much about AI, and they were not exposed, or they didn't want to be exposed to AI before taking this class. And then they went into to do internships, and then the firms asked them if they knew how to use AI. And that's when they felt, okay, now I need to get on this, like, trend of understanding how I can employ this to get a job, basically. So when we were looking at the expectations and the concerns, I noticed also the students had more concerns than positive things to say about it. So that's why I turned the concerns into more of like expectations. So students don't learn how to use AI in this class. Actually, they learn how to read it, to question it, and to design with awareness of what it carries forward and what it erases in the process. So this is it's a diagram of my class. Basically what I teach. I took my syllabus and I made it into a diagram. So we start like the first 5 weeks with an AI literacy and critique. I introduce them to reading by Kate Crawford, and earth extractions and labor, and environmental challenges, as well as racial biases by Ruha Benjamin and Joy Buolamwini and different authors that talk about, like biased data sets, how the internet is racist, how AI works, the ethical aspect, authorship, agency, all that stuff. So we talk a lot about that. We have very critical conversations. And then the project that they were working on is actually a world building exercise where they were gonna try to imagine a world or future of this world of humanity with AI. Like how are we thinking about the future when AI now is becoming a part of our daily life and daily conversation. So in the midst of all that, that's when I came across xFigura in the summer, and I was really, really impressed by this platform and how this like sandbox of all these AI tools, so I don't have to actually tell them go and look at Midjourney or look at DALL-E or open like anything about OpenAI or any other tool, but like you can have access to all those into one platform. And we started in August. Actually, this was in September, so we started week 3. I introduced them to xFigura, and at that time, I think you had 22 or 20, something in the 20s models. And what I did in this case, because I really wanted them to understand the models, is basically I assigned each student 2 to 3 models to study in depth and to go to the websites to look at where are they, for example, bringing their information from, what are they using, like everything that they had, the pros and cons. They experiment with the model, and the students would make a presentation, almost like an introduction to each one of these tools to the whole class. And that way, I think the students, instead of coming into the class not knowing anything about AI, now they are actually exposed to 20 plus models that they know more in depth, even without trying it, just through their classmates' experiments and how and of course, like what are the pros, the cons, the comparisons, and then we have a critical conversation and critical debate about all these models and which one could be more beneficial for them in their respective disciplines. So then we started to work on workflows and learning about workflows and what does it mean to do a workflow. And everything is really in an analog form, because until now we're not really generating anything. We're not using AI to generate or to we're not prompting. We're just trying to brainstorm. So how can a workflow work? So this is one of the students, and what they did is basically they categorized their workflow step by step, and then they started brainstorming about, okay, which AI model that could serve for this task, for instance. And then they started considering the ethical consideration in terms of like the efficiency, sustainability, cultural sensitivity as well, which is something that was very big in the class. It's talking about cultural sensitivity and how like certain cultures are erased from the AI data sets. And then we get into prompt engineering, and they start talking about how like they can prompt or like what kind of structure they can use to do their prompts. And then they even came up with a matrix where they would, for instance, say at each stage which model they will use, how many credits it will take them, and what is the justification for the choice for that specific model in particular at a certain stage. And also in terms of analog or more of a like not generating anything, they even went into the xFigura platform, and they started imagining how they would put the workflow and with their own input. So they bring in their own imagery and all the consideration that they want to put into their projects. So the world building is the students were tasked to create a unique fictional world that basically reflects their personal perspective on AI and the future of humanity, and using xFigura as the primary tool. The goals were basically to imagine this future, to apply the AI knowledge that they acquired throughout the semester, especially the critical conversations that we had, address their concerns, but also be in term with the expectations, because we were having a really big moral dilemma in the class. It's like, we want to use it, but we don't want to use it at the same time. So what do we do? And then they were tasked to write manifestos and reflecting on AI biases, inclusivity, sustainability, and authorship. And then, of course, the storytelling aspect, which was a big thing from this world building exercise, using text, visuals, models, and immersive presentations. And in the midst of all this, I want to mention that I exposed them also to what does it mean? What does world building mean? So they had lectures from people who came from journalism and from media studies and even from theology that talk, and gaming that talk about what is world building and what does it mean, and what are is that my time? Sorry. I'll go fast. So, and before we even started again generating anything, we had a 3 weeks brainstorming conversation about, okay, what do we mean by world building? Like, we chose the characters, the tones, the references, the sound, the world settings, the audience, like who are they designing for, and how they would like to showcase this. So this is one of the projects. I'm not going to show everything, but this is one. I just wanted to show this very quick glance at this one project where the students imagine, instead of looking in the future, actually the student wanted to look in the past before even humans existed, and that was the world that she was trying to imagine. So this is one of the ways we used xFigura. Is the students looked at archives of archival pictures from Earth, images of the Earth from, I think, the 60s and the 70s in old magazines, and brought those as references, but also sketched a lot of the scenes herself, and sketched a lot of the characters, and I will show you in a bit the characters. And then this is her entire workflow, and she also calculated how many credits she used, and of course which model she used. So these are, like, for example, the scene generation process. These are the characters. So you see the sketches, but then you see like how she just added, for instance, to the sketches. The sketches are very authentic, so she kept the same the agency over her drawings, but then brought in, for example, some of the aesthetics. And this student is a product designer and graphic graphic designer as well. So she really was keen on keeping that authenticity in her work. And then she tried with 3D generation processes, and then panoramic also images, because we wanted to do a virtual reality experience and even augmented reality. But it's not a studio, so we ran out of time, and we ended up not doing an exhibition at the end of this class, but we are still working on it at the present semester, and we're planning an exhibition that's going to be immersive. This is another example of another student work where she was trying to imagine also like she was inspired from literature and from spirituality and spiritual spaces, and trying to bring in this idea of serenity and transcendence in the age of AI, and how AI could be part of this world she's imagining. So I want to thank my students, my amazing students who actually we're welcoming to the idea of using AI, and even though they were opposed to it at the beginning, but then using it in a very efficient way and a very thoughtful way. And now, if one thing that I really appreciate them getting from this experience is the fact that now they can go and talk about it in a different way than how they came into the class. So there's more awareness and AI literacy awareness, I would say. So we are now planning an exhibition, hopefully in sometime the next 3 months. And the exhibition is going to incorporate more of xFigura world building, especially with the new AI models that have been incorporated. But also we're bringing in virtual reality and augmented reality to make it more immersive. And this is going to be shared with the community in Boulder to bring in to bring in more awareness about AI literacy and the things that we can do with it without feeling guilty, if I may say. So with that being said,
Thank you so much, Nazreen. That was incredible.
Thank you.
There's so much to unpack there. I would love to have a longer discussion with you about that. But the ways in which you really ask the students to be very critical of the tools that they're using and not use them mindlessly, I think these are really important skills that we really need to encourage our students to take on and be more critical about all the tools that they're using. So, and of course with AI as well. So thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Let me introduce Sharmeen. Sharmeen Youssef is an associate professor of architecture at the University of Texas in Arlington, specializing in AI-driven and computational design. Her research investigates performative systems, environmental responsiveness, and advanced design technologies at the intersection of AI, ecology, and architecture. And Sharmeen is also an early adopter of xFigura, has used it actually on really exciting work and in publications. So very excited to see the work that you're showing today. Thank you, Sharmeen.
Thank you, Tatiana. Let me know if everything is good. Okay. You can see my full screen at this point. Let me see. You can see the screen perfectly?
Yes, we see it perfectly.
Okay, there's one issue. I need to plug in my charger just to avoid any technical. So give me 1 second, guys. I'm sorry. 1 second.
COVID is long behind us by now. We all lose our Zoom skills.
I think that was the problem. We should be on Zoom instead of Meet.
George, you just like Google Meets. I don't know why.
Okay, I'm good. I just wanted to avoid my computer dying in the middle of the presentation. You can see me, hear me perfectly, and see my screen, correct?
Correct. We see and hear you perfectly.
Thank you. So yes, I tried to give this presentation a title similar to the recent work in my research and teaching, which is transcending representation in AI. And again, thank you so much, Tatiana and George, for this invitation. I'm so excited to be with amazing people like we saw in the previous presentations. A little bit about me and why I'm doing this, because actually this AI enhanced image of myself was also something interesting, that I look prettier here because there's some AI. So one thing about me is that I just joined University of Texas, Arlington. So I will present the latest work, especially my recent fall semester teaching, but I also have to give background on my research. So I used to be at Florida Atlantic University for 6 years. And when I joined UTA recently, I am actually establishing a research lab, the Performative AI Research Lab. As you see, these are AI videos and possible renderings. It's gonna be kind of happening by the end of this semester. So the Performative AI Lab will house an LED system to visualize AI research, as well as a robotic arm and scanning, and how we can see what's happening with a robotic arm with the camera and computer vision research. So I'm interested in that type of research at this point. But basically, the Performative AI Lab will be also a statement for our school and our college for this type of research. I also want to mention, similar to Carla and following many initiatives at UTA, we are establishing an AI certificate. And this is because UTA particularly, and this is a little bit about it, I just submitted this in the fall, but UTA has an initiative to embrace AI, and I have joined a university level AI literacy. So we will have an AI literacy course for all disciplines and across all colleges and departments. So my proposal for an AI certificate was approved immediately as part of this process. So we're very excited about AI. We want our graduates to be leaders in the AI field. So the current structure of the certificate is there will be 1 study and 2 elective courses. More about it, I will actually follow. So it is under development. My recent work is just a speculative work, and I wanted to share with you what I post on Instagram, just because it represents maybe kind of some of my excitement about having AI models and diffusion models, train them or encode them and prompt them to respond to more specific performative aspects in a speculative way. Facade, whether it's facade systems or kind of responsive skin systems. Now, in terms of current research that led to the teaching that I will focus on for this presentation, I actually want to give George a credit. I just received the AIA Florida in August research award because I used xFigura, and I used the capabilities and features inside xFigura, and including the translation of AI images into 3D models. So xFigura opened this whole kind of area of just simplifying that. Before that, last year, I was also investigating diffusion models, mainly Midjourney. So it was a very limited approach compared to recent work with xFigura as a platform. So yes, I adopted xFigura maybe back in March, and February or March, I was communicating with George, and I really loved it from the very beginning. Previous work also in my research is how performative aspects can inform the design process, including airflow analysis and performative aspects of daylight and energy and all of that. How can it inform decision-making, including floor plan layout? And this is one research collaboration, maybe older, 2022. Now, in my presentation, and maybe to reflect on my research work, I wanted to address aspects of creativity and AI, AI and agency, and then AI and how to evaluate AI-driven design systems. So those were questions that all my research and publication attempted to answer. But this particular presentation, I'm dedicating into how to train AI models and how to encode ecological design principles into those models. So I will show you certain older teaching, just to compare. Before, I used to use diffusion model. So this is a studio from FAU back in spring 2022. And at that studio, we used to use GAN models. And if you remember GAN models, they required a certain amount of data sets, including thousands of images and also days of training. So GAN models allowed us to experiment with this area of controlling the process of AI model training. For example, cycle GAN and style GAN, and those models, when you feed them thousands of images of your own generated images, and this is what my students did in this work. You can see from left to right, this is the workflow with multiple AI models experiments, and all of them are using specific also image quality and image, and that was a constraint in GAN models because of the GPU and graphics necessary. So we worked with 512 by 512 pixels, and there was limitations, but the students were very creative in responding to those limitations. So they trained multiple GAN models on their own computationally designed and generated data sets. And then they follow the process from certain systems and levels of design and architecture, whether it's at the massing and volumetric study level to a kind of speculative structure to speculative responsive skin. And then they had their own creative way of converting AI images into 3D models by stacking, by interpolating certain images, coming up with this 3D meshes and floor plans. They're all driven or inspired by their AI generated work. So yes, that was before we were, at that time, 2022, there was OpenAI actually in 2021 enabled us all to access DALL-E and Clip. VQGAN Clip was amazing at that time. And then, but we still relied on GAN models in that studio. Now, in terms of how AI informed or how my research on performance-driven design was informed by AI, I published this important book on AI in performance-driven design. And in that book, we are introducing a method in a generative system where our AI model can be plugged in for any designer, a trained model on floor plans and their associated and corresponding daylight meshes, and how the model can help with prediction. So this was kind of early 2020 and 2021 when we were looking at the transition from simulation to prediction, which is something already happening and maybe has been happening for a long time. Now, in one application of transitioning to diffusion models, I was a coordinator for a daylight-driven studio at FAU. And in my coordination, I was looking at how diffusion models can help us in a way navigate this design space exploration with testing multiple design options where daylight is actually rendering or informing the morphology and the composition of a space. So I developed my own workflow where you have a coupled system, AI, diffusion model, mainly exploration with daylight simulation. And this was particularly presented at the ACSA Intersections AI design practices that Tatiana was chairing as a conference. It was a great conference because we were looking at AI and pedagogy and how important it is for us as researchers and educators to exchange this type of like learned and shared feedback and our own perception of how to teach with those diffusion models, for example. So for me, daylight is a form giver, and I didn't say that. I'm quoting other important researchers like Professor Reinhardt from MIT, who actually and I follow that because I do believe daylight particularly is important in a very initial design phase. So that's the workflow, and this is part of the students' kind of work, like conceptualization. They did precedent analysis with the fusion model, creating design variation with the fusion model, creating spaces inspired by what they actually produce from the fusion models, and all of that. So yes, this was like a year and ago, or actually the second studio I coordinated was last year, but then I just want to present one part on how I also attempted to evaluate AI-driven design systems. So in my evaluation of previous workshops and research that I've done with my colleagues and collaborators, we looked at, okay, how do we evaluate the connectivity of multiple AI models? So we came up with a system and kind of interconnectivity measure that we can look at what we've done before, what our students have done before, and then give it a metric. And the metric we used was an entropy measure, and how creative exploration can have a diversity of AI model connected. And a delayed connection is advantageous to the design process in terms of creative exploration. And this is the latest studio, and this is particularly in support and collaboration with George, and George presented to our studio and using mainly xFigura. So in this case, sometimes the students had knowledge in Midjourney, and there wasn't a valid use of Midjourney, but the majority, and actually, let's say later, I think we didn't need Midjourney as much. So xFigura was our main platform. This is also driven by my summer research, and this particular workflow I'm presenting to the coming ICSA annual meeting in late March in Chicago. And basically, it's a process where using diffusion models and at multiple phases to address specific design tasks. So I shared this with my students, and this became their workflow or described, and they would actually deviate from that. The brief was AIA COTI Top 10 Design Competition for students, and this is examples of student work. These are boards driven by or documenting what they did inside xFigura, moving from like a simple idea, developing it with multiple prompting and text and input images to achieve a more kind of evolving design conceptualization, maintaining the concept rather than overriding previous iteration, and following certain site analysis specific tasks, and then following a specific workflow that the students actually generated and developed. So these are some of the boards, and you can see the alternation and the transition from section to a more developed section, to certain facade, to certain 3D. The students were really excited. They also trained their own AI models. They trained LoRa models, and this was also in support and help with George. And then this is for them. This is one of my students, Arit and Mario, documenting xFigura inside. You're looking at inside, and then how they're using their trained model, interacting with their trained model to generate more concept-specific design outputs. Okay, I know I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna be fast at the end. So these are some examples of the students' outputs, and these are like training data sets and leading to 3D meshes. This was all kind of achieved through xFigura. These are also LoRa trainings and how they developed these data sets and how they explored specific ideas. These are outputs. This was the midterm, also midterm. And then this is towards the final. So they actually developed the project more precisely with systems integrated. And then these are latest renderings of that studio. I want to give thanks to George, of course, and Tatiana too, and then to our students at the School of Architecture at FAU and at UTA. I also want to just point that I'm presenting next week, similar time, for Fort Worth Arts, or Arts Fort Worth, on AI and the arts. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sharmeen. That was very, very interesting, and it's really interesting to see the way that you connect thinking about AI as a tool to do, a lot of optimization and data-driven design, but then also the production of this more ephemeral kind of design processes. So it's nice seeing both of those extremes in your work. So thank you so much for your presentation. Move to Marco and William.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much, Marco and William. So we have Marco Marato is an associate professor of architecture and urban design at the University of Parma and director of Gaia. Is that pronounced correctly? Gaia? Research Lab.
Yeah.
His research focuses on urban morphology as a foundation for sustainable urban design, with extensive publications on urban form sustainability and design methodology. And then William Bozola is a co-founder and lead AI researcher at Gaia Research Lab and an architect specializing in AI-driven architecture and urban morphology. His work explores AI-based design workflows, integrating design data analysis, parametric systems, and generative models across image, video, and 3D generative workflows. And so it's really great to see how this program at University of Parma has evolved, leading to more of these conversations in the Italian context. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, George. And thank you, Tatiana. I'll try to share my screen. Okay. Let me see if you see it. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
All right, perfect. Well, first of all, before to start, I thank you again. And I just spent a few words on the Gaia Research Lab. That is the lab we've been founding in the University of Parma, devoted to research, design, and educational, all together, and enhancing each other. That is very important to us. The Gaia Design Studio is our, let's say, oops, sorry, something happened. I mean, I'm not going to see my, okay. It's our educational branch, let's say, and we are basically a master in international master in architecture and urban design. And I would say that our motto is we don't teach AI, we teach architecture in a world in which AI exists. But let's start from the beginning. The beginning was Italo Calvino and its book, The Invisible Cities. We somehow met 3 years ago when we discovered that its fantastic dry and layered syntax was perfect for the generative AI. His language was focusing on atmosphere, memory, light, material, sound, temperature, nothing dealing directly with architecture. But the results was surprisingly, when we use his text describing the city of Octavia, one of the visible cities, a net city. We gave it to Midjourney. We asked her to start generating for the first time this Calvino city. We don't have time to see the video, but it was quite surprising. And then we start understanding that within an architectural design course, AI is relevant to architecture only when it enters within the process as a structure of thought. So since the beginning, we tried to move from a, let's say, typical prompting pairing approach. So not asking anything to AI, but start trying to write storyboard according to a very design narrative approach. Our goal was to ask students to make relations, to create sequences, to make scenes, to work on time, atmosphere, all other stuff, like in Calvino examples, used to create the story. That is quite important because on one side, it is a storytelling approach is completely iterative, criticizable, teachable, and above all, we are international masters with the students coming more or less from all over the world, from Iran to China to Europe to North Africa. So guys from a very different background, different cultural, different gender, different experience. And actually there are 90 guys, so a huge number of students. But using this very narrative approach, we could bridge over all these differences in order to put all them together working on a similar method. Because at the end of the day, we saw how the outputs can be 1,000, what the method, it's just more or less 1 per person. That's quite useful when we teach with the AI architecture through AI, because at the end of the day, we can have a method that is readable and, you know, somehow scientific, but the result is always very authorial. So keeping the background of the students, it's enormous. So we start using this approach in according to a weekly round interaction as a learning engine. So this, all students start writing, they start testing their writings with xFigura, then criticizing their output in collectively in the studio, then rewriting at home and coming back to the critique. Students used to learn to be very precise in language and above all in syntax, because they are writing before designing, or actually writing instead of designing. They learn to be very coherent when they create scenes, above all in a relationship between inner and outer spaces, and the relationship about architecture and context, and so on. They learn to be very critical about their own outputs and the outputs of their colleagues. And above all, what is very important to us, according to a narrative design approach, they learn working within a process. The process is the design phase. The design and the process are absolutely the same stuff, according to us. As I said before, we can have many outputs, but it is in the process that as much as the process is reached, as much reach is the result, is the output. And it is within the process that all the difference can be gathered together in order to produce quality results. Our course is annual, so it's made of 2 semesters. In the middle, we have an exhibition and a jury moment, and a very intensive in-the-field workshop of 10 days. During the first semester, we had 3 packages of exercise. The first one is learning to write, in which the goal is to turn writing into an architectural tool. So we ask students to write very small texts, to test it with the xFigura in a relationship that is text image, then to come to the studio, critique it collectively, and then rewrite it at home for the next week. For instance, our first exercise was the Capriccio of Canaletto. Canaletto created a fantastic Venice, putting all these Palladian buildings around Canal Grande, and we asked to the students, first of all, to describe this Capriccio. Then we asked them to interpret it, because we wanted not just to have to rehab the same kind of Capriccio painting, but we want to have we asked students to have a new kind of Capriccio, in which the logics and the relations were maintained, but in completely, why not, different place and different time. The second package was to learn writing with a chatbot, in which the chatbot, of course, is not a tool to make things easier, but it is a tool to make things better. So we asked the students to draft a small storyboard, together with a chatbot, testing it with xFigura in a text with image and image to image workflow. And for instance, the first exercise of the package was to redesign the Oslo Opera House of Noeta, asking them to imagine that that is their own project. So they had to describe it as there was their own project, and to see what happened. The third package of this first semester was to reach a complete storytelling. We asked students to write a proper storyboard using text, using sketches, using image. And for instance, we asked them to tell us the story of the library. So write about the library as a whole. Then we asked them to write about the inner spaces of the library, about the outer space of the library, and the relationship the building, the architecture is going to have with the context. And above all, we asked them to put all these scenes, all these scenarios, all these elements together in order to build up a real story, a real narrative. That was very important. The last months of the first semester is given to let students learn about the base of the parametric tools, basically Grasshopper, thanks to Arturo de Razzo Montiel that joined the Gaia Research Lab this year. And the main focus was to let students able in the second semester to let the AI scenarios, atmosphere, meaning somehow become real thanks to the parametric tools in order to transform these meanings of AI, these stories into real architecture, into real urban design. Between the 2 semesters, we have this exhibition and jury, and we evaluate the narrative coherence of the students, so how these sequences, hierarchies, relations are really effective and are connected to each other according to a proper syntax. Of course, we evaluate the capability of control or the multimodal generation of xFigura, many other things. We ask them also to be able to start, mirroring the parametric formalization of the ideas of the stories written during the first phase of the semesters. Here's some of the boards of the students. I'm going fast because we don't have time to see them in detail. Just two things I want to show you. We kept a small number of students, 5 on 90. Quite clever, actually. They start working with us at the Gallery Research Lab, and I'm going to show you just 2 very quick videos. Actually, not all of them, just the beginning, because this is a canteen in Monferrato, and these other is the project for the Fendi Museum in Paris. And what I'm very happy about is that in a 2.5 months, these guys were able to learn our methodology through this narrative approach and start working with us with real projects. Then in the end of February, we go to Porto for the eco-urban regeneration of the former Gulf refinery. And this moment is very important. It's a very intensive workshop in which all the work they have been doing using AI and parametric tools have to go together in order to produce the urban project and architectural design. A particular attention will be given to the parametric environmental design, thanks to Angelo Figliola. He joined the Gaia Research Lab this year as well. And this is a very important moment, preparing, let's say, the second semester. We once again have a not linear but cyclic process made of narrative, generation, critique, rewriting, and so on, to reach then at the end the formalization by Grasshopper. Just a few words on xFigura. It was a quite surprised because we all know it as an all-in-one fantastic tool for generate images and design. But what we discovered was utility for in educational infrastructure. It was very useful, above all, in a narrative design, according to a narrative design approach, thanks to its multimodality, iterability, and traceability. That will really help students and us to control all the process, to go up and down all the process since the beginning till to the end. That was very important. Students were very happy. And we are very happy, right, because at the end of this first semester, all these 90 students were able to work with AI and xFigura and with the base of the Grasshopper in order to create architecture. We are right in the middle. We are going to start this second semester in Portugal, but once again, we do not teach AI tools. We teach architecture in a world where AI exists. I've been going very rush. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marco. That was so interesting. And the role of narrative in architecture is obviously such an important thing that often gets overlooked. So it's really great to see the students engaging with that and bringing that into their narratives with architecture. Actually, the Calvino text was something that I also used this year with my freshmen. So it was really fun to see the generations that you were able to produce with your students. Moving to the next speaker, I would like to warmly welcome Charu Srivastava. She is a lecturer in architectural technology at Harvard University Graduate School of Design and also at Wentworth Institute of Technology. And she's a researcher at the MIT Livable Spaces Lab. Her work focuses on human building interaction, spatial perception, and high-performance environments, exploring how AI and data analytics can enhance design processes and support health and well-being in the built environment. So really looking at design that's data-driven, looking at the segmentation workflows, and these different kinds of ML merged with generative workflows. So thank you, Charu, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Tatiana, for that very warm welcome. I'm gonna try to share my screen as quickly as possible and keep this moving along. All right, so apologies for the formatting, because I think some of the slides might not be working the way I want them to, but we'll dive right in. So today I'm going to be talking about the classes that I've been teaching at Harvard and Wentworth, and they're all related to data-driven design and how we can incorporate them into the design process. And so, George, you can go next slide. As a little background into how we got here and how I got here, it started with me being a designer in a design firm right after college, and I was tasked with laying out parking lots and parking garages. And every time the building would change, there would be a new requirement to increase the parking size, reduce it. And this just iterated again and again until the design for the building was finalized. And so then the design for the parking garage could be finalized. And this resulted in me having many weeks of very boring work to do and generally becoming a rather disgruntled designer. And so it led me to think that there must be a better way to do this kind of work. And so next slide. It took me through a process of the PhD that I did, the Doctor of Design at Harvard in Architectural Technology, where I was looking a lot at data-driven design, and it's particularly how we can apply it into human-centered architecture. And so next slide. Obviously, in the 5 or 6 years since the time when I was making parking lots, generative AI has exploded, and now there are all these many different ways that you can generate parking designs. Pretty much the way I wanted it to be 6 years ago, but it's happening in reality. But along with all of this, newfound power that comes with generative design, there's a lot of other issues that are associated with how we design in this format. And so all these questions like, is AI going to take over the world? Is AI evil? Is AI going to take all our jobs? They start to come to mind. Next slide. And even when we start to think about how powerful AI is, I mean, if you think back to just a few years ago, generative AI was very much not at the place where it is today. And so even these past 3 or 4 years, we've seen rapid improvement in the way design has just exploded. Next slide. But there are still a lot of issues that we come across. Number one being the data set bias. So all of these models are being trained on a very specific data set of images that are widely available on the internet. There's a sustainability bias where a lot of AI tries to make these very futuristic looking buildings that tend to mesh together extreme biophilia in the sense of like just greenery, but also very artificial materials at the same time. There's an economic bias where most of the models are trained on buildings that are from very high profile design firms, and so they tend to skew towards a certain aesthetic. And lastly, we have the style mimicry bias where, again, a lot of these models are training on very well-renowned artists and architects, and so they tend to mimic their style. And in some ways, we're losing what the average architect is able to do in a multitude of different situations. And so even before I was teaching my classes last semester, I tried this very fun prompt with ChatGPT where I asked it to make a futuristic smart city in India in the year 2040, which when you think about it is not really that far off. It's 15 years in the future. For context, for anyone who doesn't know what some of the cities in India might look like, there's an image of Mumbai and New Delhi, which is the metro. And the first example of what the city looked like was just futuristic smart city in India in 2040. And it was pretty much a city that you could find anywhere in the world. Trying to add some traditional elements to it, which gives us a second image, was this really weird dystopian mix between what looks like some monuments and then these very wavy sky-high buildings in the back. When I asked it if it could make it in a more architectural rendering format, it tries to give it a little bit more personality. It tries to bring people, but at the same time, it's still showing taco food trucks and all of these things that just feel wrong in some sense. And so a lot of what I've been trying to do in my classes is to actually think about not just using these tools as a means to an end, but actually using them as a way to add more critical thought into the process of what they're designing. And then ultimately thinking about what is the purpose of creating these kinds of designs. And so in our classes, we think about architecture as data. So not only is there the built space, there's the human response, the way people react to being in a certain space. And then there's the computational models that allow us to actually tie all of these together. So we're not just bridging design intuition, but we're adding this framework of analytics to it. And ultimately, the idea is that if you're designing experiences, you're able to design outcomes. And so whether the space is a healthcare space, education, workplace, or public spaces, there are different outcomes related to health and well-being, work performance that we can actually try to cultivate through this process of data analytics. Next slide. And so in the classes that I've been teaching, we look at a whole bunch of different environmental qualities ranging from things like temperature, air quality, IEQ, materials, biophilia. Next slide. And at the same time, we're also thinking about the physiological metrics. And so there's a whole host of different ways that you can gather this data. The simplest way is usually surveys, which is self-reported, but it's a scalable and very easy and cost-effective way to gather a lot of data. But at the same time, you can also expand to areas such as VR and wearable devices as well. But the cruciality is that if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And so the idea is that how can we improve the outcomes in the spaces that we're designing? Next slide. And so in our class, we go through a whole range of different computational methods, ranging from descriptive statistics, inferential statistics, and ultimately predictive analytics, which is the machine learning and AI tools and models that we have been hearing a lot about recently. Next slide. And we can keep going. But increasingly, architects are starting to work with visual data. And so this means that using models such as computer vision models really help us to enable different use cases, whether that's mapping, urban analytics, adaptive spaces, or digital twins. And so, next slide. We, in our classes, we're using a lot of image-based analytics in order to actually understand how spaces can affect people's perceptions. And so the reason for this is that they're very scalable. There's a lot of control you can use with the images, a lot of comparability across sites, and architects use photos and renderings every day in their design processes. And so during my dissertation, I was doing a process that had to do a lot with parametric modeling, where I was trying to design different workplaces and understand how the different features might affect people's responses. These were synthetic images, and this was a few years ago, so at that time xFigura did not exist. And so as I was coming up with workflows for the classes that I was teaching in the fall, I reached out to George and I asked him if we would be able to use xFigura in our classes in order to actually do this process of generative AI and then use it as a pipeline for understanding how it's affecting people's perceptions. Next slide. And so briefly, the idea of computer vision is that we are using pixel-wise analyses of images, and semantic segmentation is the one that we tend to use the most in our classes. It's about giving computers the ability to interpret visual scenes in a way that's not the same as human vision, but it is using pattern recognition in a pixel-wise format. Keep going. And so as you can see in an example, an image here, this is how the images get converted into this mask as a segmentation mask. And it can actually label each element, each pixel in the image as a different element, whether that's tree or floor. Keep going. And ultimately, what we've been doing in our classes is having these equations that associate the different features in the images with some kind of scoring. And when we have these equations, we're actually able to then decide either through manually derived equations or machine learning based derived equations, a score for the image to describe its quality. And that can range from a whole different areas of metrics, whether those are well-being metrics, preference metrics, or related to any other human outcome. Keep going. And so just to give you, in this last minute, some very quick workflows and examples from what students have been able to do, essentially you start with this baseline image of whatever site it is that we want them to be studying. A lot of them were using different areas from their studios, and they basically used xFigura to iterate on those images, and they're trying to do it in a very controlled manner. So they're changing one element at a time, whether that's related to materials or the greenery or the layout the lighting, and then they put those same images through the computer vision segmentation models, and they're able to generate these labels on what's in the images. Keep going. And eventually, through their scoring metrics, they're able to generate images that have higher or lower scores. And based on what elements they're inside, they're able to decide that this is a high scoring image or a low scoring image based on machine evaluation. Keep going. Separately, we also have human evaluation. So instead of giving those images that xFigura creates to a machine model, we actually give it to human participants. Keep going. And so human participants rate these different images with different qualities. And eventually they're able to keep going. One more slide. We're able to then create majority preferences for what's in the image. So, you know, the participant likes this image, for example, the most with this combination of qualities. Next slide. And they're able to do a whole bunch of different statistical analyses to actually decide whether these differences are significant or not in the studies that they're doing. And so eventually, last slide. Is AI going to take over the world? Is AI evil? Is it going to take all our jobs? No, not if we learn how to use it. And so I know I'm over time, so I'll stop over there, but happy to take more questions and happy we were able to get through that.
Thank you so much, Sharu. That was really nice to see, especially, you know, the more equation-based ways of analyzing and using the computer vision as well as a layer of understanding the images that are being produced. So we have a very consolidated discussion portion. And if our speakers don't mind staying a few minutes extra, we can make it a little bit longer, maybe. But we do want to have some time for discussion and opening up, hopefully, the floor to some questions from outside as well. But I would like to start actually with a question to Christoph. So looking at, you know, how you teach simplexity and creativity. Obviously, you've done a lot of work with bamboo structures and looking at construction methodologies and kind of this optimization with the materials that you're using. And of course, technologies have changed dramatically in this period of time that you've been working with your methodologies and with the material of bamboo. So in combining, you know, your work and your teaching in simplexity, I wonder how your concept of simplexity has really changed with AI and your approach to teaching computational precision-based workflows.
I think one of the central ideas of simplexity is try to gain control of the system and increase your agency through the tools that you have at your disposal. And I think when parametric tools arrived to the scene, that really became a vehicle for that. Suddenly, complex tasks became way more simple. I have a feeling, and AI numerical tools, more optimization-driven tools, multi-parametric optimization or evolutionary algorithms, things like that, they all fall under that same category in that they end up in what Randy Deutsch named the super users within architecture. And we have seen in the past 10 years, several people, young people entering in architectural design firms, suddenly being able to fully upend production workflows, optimizing them, doing the work from 20 people in 2 years with only 3 people in a couple of months. And so that was, I think in that world, simplexity really had a change and impact. The current tools that we see, I think at this point are still very, very different. And having worked with them more now proactively in the past couple of months, my anxiety around them has actually dropped a lot. I think they're incredibly fun. They're really incredible conversation starters. But I think within the world of architectural production, I'm not yet too nervous about where they're going to head, because a lot of the real, between brackets, complexities of architectural production, not of conceptual design, not of graphic design, not of video production, or the narrative side of the architectural industry, which is part of it, but of the parts of implementation there, I don't see them impacting that much yet. But it is going incredibly quickly. And the latest 3D models that are automatically being produced with the segmentation that's possible inside them, the quick links to parametric scripts and codes there as well, combined with vibe coding, things are going to go very, very quickly. So I think there, the diminishing difficulties are going to really impact as well. But so I think it's going to profoundly shift practice. But I think the true original contributions that architects have brought in recent years, where they're really able to think outside of the box or come with really inventive lateral solutions that normally an AI model would not arrive at, there I hope, maybe naively, or maybe I'm romantic in that front, I'm not too worried about that. I think what somebody recently wrote an article, I'm blanking out now where it was, where they said that AI is very good at producing an average or a better than average product. And unfortunately, for most of the work, better than average is more than good enough. And therefore, there will be some level of implosion in the industry. But I think for the frontier innovations there, I think that's very exciting to see where it's going to go, because the ideation capabilities of these tools are really, really fun. The speed at which you can spitball with it is really exciting. So I don't know if that answers it.
I think equally, it's, I believe you were describing, if you're a good architect, you're a good designer, if you learn how to use these tools, I really like this analogy that you can be, supercharged. I describe AI as augmented imagination versus artificial intelligence. So being a bad, if you don't go through that educational cycle, learn the discipline, learn your foundations, I don't think you can reach that equivalent level. But let's say that status quo could, the democratization of these tools can really, certainly push, let's say that the center of that.
But the danger of it is that the tools give the illusion of control so much more quickly. And there, I think what I've seen with fresh graduates or with entering students as well, they find it very difficult at times to come to terms with their lack of control or agency or understanding that they have of the results. And that's why I was bringing in the analog and the model making and the materiality to create that friction again, to get into a deeper engagement with the tools.
Yeah. Maybe I'll take that as a stepping point for Carla and for Shermeen. Since you both are, Shermeen, about to, and Carla, you have introduced a certificate, I would love to know how you guys are thinking, maybe already now, in what does the first year studio now look like in light of a school which is progressive in terms of AI? How do you push collaging? Christoph mentioned the analog. Shermeen, you're pushing several other personal agendas. I'm curious, where would you start and what would you change?
So it's a really interesting question, and this is one of the questions we ask in our AI class. Actually, that's the final project the students have to develop, which is to create a design studio for the first years in architecture. Like, if AI is in the infrastructure that we are using and we're playing with, how does the first year of architectural study looks like? So the reason why I thought it is important to have a certificate and not seminars or isolated classes in the architectural curriculum was that I think there is still the need to have introductory sessions or foundational courses, like, for example, the one that we offer on fundamentals of coding and computation, which is not to teach about AI, but is to teach words, where it's coming, why do we use computation, how do you start reading code? Because I think the idea of literacy right now is not who can write faster and better, it's about who can read what has been written. And I think that's what initially what we thought about, having a curriculum that is forming students early to understand and use terminologies that can help them communicate with other fields. And I think what is really also important is to have these not only hands-on exercise, but as well a discursive, a theoretical framework of how to talk about AI today. So that's one of the classes we also have in certificate, which is called AI and Ethics in Architecture. And there we frame and we present a lot of writings that are not only on the last 10 years, which has been it's incredibly hard to keep track of how many people are writing about AI. But we actually talk about several analogies that we have seen through technology throughout time. And we talked about what does it mean to have how do people talk about technology in relationship to humans? How do we talk about, for example, the concept of double articulation presented by Deleuze, trying to address a topic through 2 points of view? And so we try to do the same thing with AI, and that's where the analogy of an instrument and a tool are very helpful to try to describe what is an instrument and the many layers that can have and what is a tool. And then I think it's important. You've been a guest lecturer and been giving some of the tutorials in our machine learning for architects class, which is this hands-on exercise. So I think it's not about only trying to have a set of or a pipeline or a toolkit with the design practice, but is to give them vocabulary, to give them framework and a theoretical background for them to know that this is not new, that humans have been intelligent since we are humans. It's not that the last 10 years made us more or less intelligent. And I think to just finish my my answer to your question about how will the first years of architecture look like with AI, I will say right now, even in kindergarten and in elementary school where my son is, they are being exposed with a lot of different technologies that they need to. Right now, for example, my son is extremely aware that using AI for him is an act of cheating. So I think there is a moment where you have to change that narrative in a sense of saying, all right, how are you using it? For which, where are you using, how are you using, and why are you using? I think there is a moment to be very not concerned, but at least allowing a discussion, allowing a conversation, and preventing this very fast input-output relationship. And I think it's something that for me, it has been eye-opening is the idea of everybody wanting to control AI. And I think the idea of control is so dangerous and has never been successful throughout history. I don't think there is a relationship where the master and the slave were, like yelled any positive result. So I'm thinking right now, maybe there is another dynamic that we can introduce in the sense of a much more layered. I love this word, simplicity. I don't know. I mean, complexity in Spanish, we have the word that is the difference between simple and easy, right? I think it's in English could be something like that. And I find complexity, that word, that is a very beautiful analogy to something that is fast, which will be easy. But complexity is something that is layered and is easy and is comprehensive enough for you to work with. So I think that's for me the answer.
Yeah, I guess I can follow Carla's great feedback. I mean, from my perspective, to answer your question, George, and I agree with Carla, and I think joining UTA, I was just appointed at the university level AI literacy, and some of the questions and issues we are addressing are also related to your question, George, which is like how to teach our students, especially particular levels of education. There's this taxonomy of how you apply certain tools or technologies or introduce them at the understanding level versus the creative level. So the creative level is the highest level where you actually allow integrate an agenda where the students train their own AI models and they have this kind of agency over the process. So basically in my studio, and I was privileged to have a graduate studio. So I'm arch level students, and that I think facilitated because what I believe that I can do to introduce my research, which I have been kind of following or conducting for years into them, is that I start by addressing the issues that I was addressing in my research, which are like issues of process versus product. So we're looking at a process, and as designers and as the students themselves, I want them to kind of take a role of an orchestrator or choreographer of a process where multiple AI models are interconnected and each model is addressing specific tasks, and those models are kind of let's say labeled or categorized within specific design phases. And I do try to introduce concepts of evaluating and being critical of those AI models, because unfortunately they can be intimidated or fascinated by results that are sometimes superficial and just a pure aesthetic kind of stylistic output. So for me, I think my role is that how to maintain kind of a critical agenda in the studio, and how to introduce the students, yet allowing them to question the results of AI models. I also think that it's valid for me to translate what I used to follow the process of training GAN models. So data sets, creating data set, pre-processing, post-processing. I translated that into diffusion models. It's much easier, and it's much it's higher resolution images. Everything can happen in a few seconds. But I think for them to be able to curate the data sets and prompting and being critical of the output is really helpful. So I guess my earlier GAN model training helped in the way I interact with diffusion models, and therefore my students are aware of that, like what input they actually has to curate to interact with those models. So I do believe that it's the way we introduce those models from a critical perspective. I also think we can address aspects of bias very early, because I know that the students are aware that these models are trained on certain data, and also the fact that we know not as much of the black box process of training, but we all know that there is certain bias. So I think it's really valid to approach teaching AI from a critical perspective and allowing the students to be also critical right away in the very, very beginning. And that's, for me, was working. So for an AI certificate, we also are looking at a graduate level. So I'm not sure how can we actually do that in undergrad, and I don't know, I mean, maybe I need to talk to Carla how they do it at UF. But basically, we are aware that design expertise and knowledge is really important for the students to be able to interact with AI and engage in a process that is at a higher level, rather than maybe introduction at early years have to be carefully considered. And it does happen, and it's still important. And I agree that first year, first studio in architecture can be integrating an AI, but I think what exactly we want to achieve in that study becomes important. I hope I'm answering your question, George. Yeah.
Yes, awesome. Thanks for the answers. It's I'm hearing core languages, core knowledge, but also critical thinking, which is very much in line with the World Economic Forum's future work report. It's, critical thinking, flexible, having flexibility in the learning process. Just our daughter making a lot of noise. Really love the answers. Thank you.
And I guess building off of that as well, this idea of criticality and engaging with the data sets, as well as, Christoph, you were mentioning the fact that there's so much more to the design process that at least currently can't really be encapsulated by these AI or computational design systems. And I think those sorts of things are really what we bring as far as culture and meaning and these narratives that we want to convey. Also kind of building off some of the words that you were using, Sharmeen, this idea of curating. I mean, with architecture and design, we curate space. And with Carla, with your description of the instrument versus the tool, I think these are all kinds of terminologies that we can really think about our role in this more curatorial and creative process that really is focused on the experiential qualities of space. And so I think that segues really nicely, and maybe Nazreen or Marco could respond to this, but really thinking about the fact that AI is often framed as this more neural infrastructure, but really architecture carries these really deep cultural and symbolic and spiritual dimensions, and we use narrative so much in the way that we design spaces. So how can we then ensure that these layers are not flattened by these more data-driven systems?
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for the question. It was quite interesting, and it is one of the challenges we had in front of us. But I think that moving all this stuff into, let's say, a somehow humanistic world, we can be sure that, first of all, it's ourselves as human. That, you know, that means our story, our capacity of be critics, our and awareness, and that is able to control and to let all this stuff not be too flat, to being much more human that we are now. It's, according to me, one of the most important thing and most revolutionary thing that AI and all these the new kind of technologies are asking us. Just ask us to be as much humans as we can. So use your mind, hate, love, and so on, feel. All this kind of stuff is so empowered by the AI and new technologies, in my opinion, that they really are the way we can be relaxed and happy about all this new revolution rising up above all in the architectural and the creative field as a whole. So I think that of course, the best architect, the best man and women will use AI in the best way. Somehow, AI is in architecture is really able to let all the best of us come out, if we have it, of course. And that is why I think we can avoid two problems like flattening or using AI, generative AI, in a very common or commercial way. I mean, for the first time, what we have in our mind, because at the end of the day, the real project is in our mind and belong to all of us. We can be architect, engineering, but we can be any kind of practitioners or whatever. We have in our mind and in our soul the capacity to build up things. At the beginning, we didn't write things. We didn't have any drawings and so on. So the capability of being architects belong to man. And in this way, we can, in my opinion, really start to transfer all we have in our mind directly to the project, to the architecture, thanks to the AI. We are still at the beginning, more or less, of this process, but all the things that we have being human can be transformed and translated into form for the first time in history of man. That is very important. So to center all this stuff within a very humanistic boundary. That is somehow the real general answer to your question.
Could I ask a quick question?
Oh.
So I'll let you answer first. Go ahead.
No, you can go ahead. So since you have it.
No, I just wanted to ask a quick question as well, because we're in the educational symposium panel, right? I found it very interesting, actually, Nazreen, that you mentioned that in Boulder, people are not very open to AI coming in the beginning. And now that we're after a semester or a year for some of you of using these tools, and some universities, as I mentioned, bringing in AI certificates, I was wondering how the reaction from the Institute and from colleagues has been. Because from my side, I've seen the top of the university being very interested in it, maybe because it's a buzzword right now, maybe because they get told that it's really important, so there's a pressure from the top, and then some individuals at the bottom are trying to push for it as well, and I guess that's the choir that we're preaching to here right now. I wonder about the people in between, because again, like 10, 15 years ago, when Grasshopper came out, the first lecturer that was using Grasshopper kind of got his little space carved out. And I have the feeling in our university that they kind of stayed in that corner, and then slowly it percolated through, but it didn't really have a profound change throughout. I wonder if this time it's going to be different. So I was curious if you could tell a bit about those who are not the ones that have drank the Kool-Aid as much as we have, after a half year of trying it and showing the work that has been possible with the tools and in your schools, what the reactions have been, both from the students and from the colleagues. I mean, it was mentioned that students had a lot of anxiety in the beginning, but then it changed at the end. So I was curious to hear a bit more from them.
Yeah.
Anybody?
I can actually, I can actually answer that because I just presented at the ACSA, the AI conference in Boston that Tatiana was co-organizing. My title was the wonder, resistance, and the in-between. So literally, and I was even bringing in the idea of iconoclash from Bruno Latour, and like this idea of idealizing the tool versus wanting to, like to destroy it, and what happens to the in-betweenness. Like literally, that was like my whole presentation. Yes, so it's a struggle because I am like Sharmeen, for example. I am also in a university AI literacy program, and I'm an AI literacy ambassador, and I am supposed to be, spreading or sharing my knowledge on AI with my faculty or my colleagues and the students. But there is a resistance. Unfortunately, there isn't really a lot of acceptance right now to the tool, especially as I mentioned, we are in environmental design. So even the students are very resisting the tool because of environmental issues, because of ethical issues, also because of capitalism, because of the, this book is really important that I present in my class, which is The Empire of AI by Karen Howe. I think, and even this, like the Unmasking AI. So I have like all these books around me that I want. So the fact that we keep talking about it and we keep being critical, not just saying, oh yes, it can do so many magnificent things, right? I want to go beyond the opulence and the the polished imagery. And I think here I want to also use Walter Benjamin's philosophy about the aura and the reproduction, of the imagery, and how we lose the aura from an original art piece when it's reproduced using these digital tools. So I think we ought to keep talking about, okay, yes, we can use it, but how? I think all the people in this panel have been mentioning that, and I've been talking about that, is how to read AI. That's why, for example, when I introduced xFigura, I didn't introduce it as a generative tool, or like the generative models. I wanted the students to understand what are those models, where they come from, who's using them, how are they used, experiment with different ones to understand, okay, which one you want to use versus the other. So I think that's part of the literacy as well. Even when they count the credits, because I had this student, she was really, really struggling with this dilemma. Is I don't want to use AI because I feel guilty, right? I feel guilty that I am participating in this, environmental issues, the data centers, the water and electricity problems for people who are living in the, she really was concerned, and she was taking this class, but she didn't know what to do. And then we had to really sit down and have a critical conversation about, yes, but how are you using it? And also, how can we make a difference? So Karen Howe, for example, says, maybe we cannot make a difference at the level of the government or the federal, policies, but we can make a difference at the level of our classes, our community, our cities, even our states in the US. So, AI policies, AI regulation, I do that in my classroom. We have regulations, we come up with regulations, and we've been doing that for the last 4 years in my classes. And when a student doesn't feel comfortable using it, they have the choice to not use it. So I never impose it on anybody. So with that being said, I just had a class that got canceled this semester. It's a capstone on redesigning and rethinking the AI data centers and how they can, help communities rather than what we're seeing, like this evil image. And nobody wanted to take it because nobody was interested in that. So it is a challenge when you are in an environment where you cannot really have that message come across as let's have a conversation and let's understand it together so we can be active members of this community that can make a change.
Amazing. I would love to have a whole hour longer to just talk about this and flip the conversation. I think, Christoph, it's really interesting, and the divide is still very much real. I feel that also when I give talks, from some maybe more conservative, not in a bad way, like the Princetons versus the MITs or some other places are more forward, like accepting of new paradigms or challenging status quo. I would like to leave just one quick minute, Sharu, just to give you some voice time as well, what your thoughts are this, but maybe more specifically on Nisreen, your comment on the environmental side. Maybe you, more than others today, have brought more of this performative side of things, ML, segmentation models, how we can combine Gen AI with these workflows. How is this received? And especially since this is like a data-driven approach, which could quench maybe those concerns.
Yeah, so sorry, the question was more just regarding like how people perceive the process.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you bring a more performance-based approach versus just Gen AI. I mean, everyone brought different discourses today. How is that being received in your class and at the GSD and Wentworth?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And I'd say overwhelmingly the response was positive towards this workflow and this way of thinking about using AI in a way that's still human-centered. And so the goal for the AI is not just to evolve the design, but to evolve the design in a way that is beneficial to the users, to the occupants. And that's one side of it. And the other side of it is obviously also thinking environmentally, how is it benefiting the functioning of the building, the performance of the building. And so there's so many different ways of using computer vision and different sort of data analytics in terms of understanding how the building is operating. And so I think combining those two together and thinking about them has definitely made a big splash in all the classes, I would say, generally at Harvard and at Wentworth. And that being said, I think there were also some places where students were critical of some of these workflows, and many times they struggled to use the tools, and in times they thought that the tools were not operating to the level that they wanted, the level of control. Especially, I mean, the workflows that I was showing required an immense amount of control in terms of being able to vary just one variable at a time. And sometimes students really struggled to be able to do that effectively with some of these tools. Despite all the massive improvements that all the models have been making. I think Nano Banana was definitely one of the most popular tools that they use, one of the most popular models. But still, there are places where it's not able to fully function with what they're envisioning. And so in some ways, I think the tools are there to expand human potential, and then there are times when it tempers it, and I think it tempers it more on a cognitive level in some ways, where they, if they start with the tool, they're blocking out a whole lot of other ways of thinking, and I think that is the part that's very critical, that needs to stay human in some ways, is that thinking process first, and it's not action first, it's think first, it's imagine first, it's envision first. And so I think those are places where I think the best move forward is just knowledge in some ways, and it's just being exposed and understanding. I always tell my students, it's understanding what the tools can do and what they can't do, because I think knowing both are equally important. So you're not worried like, oh, am I losing out? Am I missing out because I don't know how to use these tools? Yes, as others have mentioned, literacy is the first step to understanding, what the tools can do, but then still realizing that there are many places where humans still excel. And so understanding what those are and being able to take advantage of both, I think, is how we actually move forward in the best way possible.
Thank you, Sharu. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I will spend 1 minute to wrap the conversation up. We've seen such a multiplicity of perspectives. What's clear is that these models are not they don't apply to one specific application. There's so many ways in which we can approach this. There's not one clear answer. What's clear is that we need to, for me at least, we need to, centralize or start bringing these, sharing more of these conversations to really have impact to define these next few years in architecture, the profession, and education. A lot will happen, as it has been. A lot more will happen, especially in light of AGI or superintelligence and the next steps of this journey. I wanted to take a quick moment also to thank Tatiana for moderating with me. It's definitely great voice in the Boston area, so do feel free to reach out to us at any point. Just a quick update on xFigura. You're welcome. On the homepage at the bottom, there's the what's new. Every week we're adding new updates, new features, you have a production mode. You can make apps, new models. Every week is something new and exciting. A small glimpse is using a Quen edit model, changing views. We're more on the generative side today. We're leaning more into 3D and agents. So do feel free to test our agent out, Visione, or test out the latest world model. So world model, essentially, if it loads, permits you to go from that single image or multiple images to then create a full scene. So this is really much the starting point of this new paradigm. Daniel Escobar and the team just gave a design morphine workshop on how to get characters, rig them, bring it into Unreal, make a scene, and then actually navigate and work in these spaces. On the creative side today, but I'd love to extend that on that performative side in future too. For students interested, the deadline is the 31st of this month. Interested in becoming campus ambassadors or being more involved in xFigura, feel free to scan this, or you guys who joined us today, feel free to share it to your students. We do offer 30% discounts. So if academics and students, feel free to email us at the email right below, and we'll just validate the email and then give you the codes. And thank you again all for joining us. We're thrilled to have you in this journey of defining, creating, rethinking what the future of design intelligence is. Thank you all for joining us.